Now to a wider view of the 60-year anniversary of the Armistice. I'm joined by Paul Carroll, the Ploughshares Fund in San Francisco. And last time we spoke, it was about the latest DPRK missile launch. Welcome back to the show, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Elaine.
You know, we saw two different remembrances this weekend, both from the DPRK and South Korea. Do you think that a reunited Korea or a peace treaty is a reality at some point?
At some point, I think it's ultimately inevitable. The unfortunate thing here is it's taken so long. Your earlier correspondent mentioned that often this is called the forgotten war. I'd like to suggest it's actually a forgotten peace. This is perhaps the last piece of unfinished business left over from the Cold War, left over from the regional tensions that have lasted for decades and in fact centuries in Northeast Asia. And I think that what we heard in the stories, in the sort of survey of the different speeches that we saw on visitations today, are some commonalities, but I also noticed some differences between what President Obama was saying and emphasizing, what North Korea was saying and emphasizing, and South Korea as well. We have to bridge these gaps and actually get past the armistice to a peace and a reunified Korea.
Well, I'd also like to get your thoughts on the DPRK's massive Victory Day parade that we saw yesterday. What can we take from that, and are there any clues about what we can expect from the DPRK anytime soon?
Well, I picked up three things from what I saw, from what I read about the parade today. The first is that they haven't moved past this kind of display. They still believe very strongly that to display and exhibit their strength, even though relatively on the international scale, it's really they're playing a hand of weakness, is very important both for their internal audiences to solidify the support of their people, of their military, and for external audiences. The second thing I picked up is the presence of China's vice president, Li Yuanchao, is, I think, very emblematic of the fact that you had a high-level Chinese presence there. Tells you a couple of things. It tells you that China is keeping close to their North Korean neighbors, and I hesitate to say friends. China is reportedly quite upset with the North Koreans over the past several months. So on the one hand, they have a presence there, but I wouldn't call it an endorsement. I would call it keeping a close eye on their little brother, if you will. Well, the third piece is what we actually, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that being said, do you think that with that presence that the DPRK is perhaps ready to take China's advice for stability on the peninsula?
Well, that's a huge question, because in the shadow of this huge military display, which they do year in and year out on these anniversaries, you also hear that the North Korean leader, the Kim Jong-un, has made signals and in fact statements that, hey, I think we're ready to get back to the six-party talks. This is the six-nation structure through which we discuss the nuclear program, the possibility of a peace treaty on the peninsula. And so on the one hand, they're showing their strength. On the other hand, they seem to be opening a door to more dialogue and negotiation.
All right, and you were going to mention that third item that we should watch out for.
Well, the third thing is what they actually had in the parade, the actual nuts and bolts of the military hardware. From what I've seen, from what I've read, not much new under the sun. There were reports perhaps of a UAV, of a drone, not conclusive at this point, but really nothing earth-shattering or nothing that was a gee whiz factor. It's kind of a bizarre picture of soldiers with backpacks with radioactive symbols on them. What does that mean? One interpretation might simply mean we are a nuclear state. Our military is ready for nuclear battle. We don't really know. These parades have often shown things that are really just mock-ups or almost decoys, if you will. So I think we ought to let a few days and some more intelligence analysis pan out before we make any conclusions about the parade.
All right, we'll leave it there.
And what it showed.
Paul Carroll from Ploughshares in San Francisco, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.